Good morning, everyone. So this is your instructor, Elaine, for our English Maritime course. So we are now on our week 56, part 1 or day 1. So for today, we are going to understand why we communicate at the sea. So there will be some communication protocol that we should know. So part of this understanding, we know that communication at the sea is the foundational element that ensures that the safety of life, the efficiency of logistics, and the accuracy of the navigation in the environment that often characterized by isolation and unpredictability. So this one, it connects the vessels with shore authorities, the port officials, and other ships. So it will be enabling the exchange of the critical data, coordination of the movement, and compliance with the international regulations. So as the part of understanding why we are communicating at the sea, I have some here broken down by the key points. So first, of course, for the safety of life and assets. So the safety is the primary driver of the maritime communications. So it also essential for preventing some accidents and managing some emergencies. So how does it all apply? So first I have here by emergency response. So emergency response. This is the reliable, the real-time communication system are used to send and distress signals. So it also relate to the urgent safety information and coordinate with the search and rescue operations. We also have here what we call the collisions avoidance. So this one is about the ships using some radar, automatic identification system, or what we call the AIS, and also the VHF radio to communicate with the nearby vessels. So by this, they're ensuring the safe distances and coordinating some passing maneuvers, especially windy, high traffic, or the narrow channels. Another one is by the weather and hazard alerts. So the constant communications, it allows the vessels to receive and updated some weather forecasts, also the storm warnings and the navigational hazards that helping the captains make informed decisions to avoid some dangerous conditions. And then lastly, and the very important one is the crew safety. So the onboard communication systems. So it ensures that the clear real-time interactions during the daily operations and drills, preventing some accidents that may caused by the human error or the misunderstanding. So it's all for about the safety of the life and assets. So next one, we have here what we call the operational logistics and efficiency. So during the operation and logistics, so the effective communications, it drives the economic aspects of the shipping, ensuring some smooth and logistic and minimizing some cost and costly delays. So here we have what we call the port coordinations. So we have the port coordinations. So this is the ships must constantly communicate with the port authorities, terminals, and agents to coordinate the arrival times, the berth availability, and also the cargo handling, which reduces some wait times and optimizes the port operations. Next, we have here what we call the voyage optimizations. So this is the real-time data exchange. So regarding the routes, the traffic, and the cargo status that enables the efficient, cost-effective voyage and reducing some fuel consumptions and operational costs. And then next is the crew welfare and management. So this is the modern satellite systems that enable the communication with the shore-based offices for maintenance, reporting, and connecting of the crew members with their families. So by this, it also improving the morale and the operational efficiency. And then lastly, it's about the navigations and compliance. So in navigation, it requires the precise up to the minute data to safely guide a ship from the port to port. So by that, we will be need a real-time tracking or what we call the AIS or the GPS. So the vessels they using a automatic identification system and also the GPS to share their positions, the speed and course. So which is very critical for the situational awareness and avoiding collisions. Next is the standardizations or the SMCP. So the IMO or the International Maritime Organization, it is established the Standard Marine Communication Process or what they call the SMCP to overcome the language barriers. So it also particularly among the multinational crews ensuring the precise and ambiguous and safe communications. Because it's really hard if you have this language barrier. So Miscommunication can lead to an accident. And then lastly, we have the regulatory compliance. So this one, the communications are very crucial for adhering to the international maritime laws. So it also includes the safety of life at the sea, and which is requires the vessel to maintain the specific communication capabilities. So as part of the communications at the sea, so we all know that the evolutions of the maritime and long distance communication, it progressed from the visual signals to electrical pulses and finally to the radio waves. So understanding how the information crossed vast distances. So before, as part of the communications or before the electricity, the communications relied on what they could be seen. So we have there what we call the signal or the visual signals where they using some flags and semaphore. So the signal flags, they are individual flags that represent some letters or specific safety messages. So I have here some example. And then the semaphore. So this is the system where an operator holds a flags in specific positions to represent some letters of the alphabet. While faster than some early methods, it was limited by the line of the sights of the weather. And then after that, Have now the electric telegram and Morse code. So in mostly in 1930s to 1940s, it introduced the electrical signaling, which removed the need for the visual contact. So we have here what we call the Morse code. So this is developed by the Samuel Morse and Arthur Vail. So this system uses some dots and dashes. So for this example, as you can see here, so A, or what we call the alpha, stands for this, and this part is what we call this is the Morse code. So the dots and dashes. We're also what we call the wire transmission. So these are the messages were sent as electrical pulses along the physical wires, allowing for the rapid communications across continents. And then lastly, they have now the wireless telegraphy, or what we call the radio. So in the late 1890s, so they adopted the Morse code for transmission via radio and eliminating the need for the physical cables. So they have now the radio telegraph. So if this is the early, what we call the spark gap, the transmitters could only send an on and off pulses, or what we call the Morse code, rather than the voice. So in terms of the maritime impact, this was the revolutionary for the ships at sea. So they famously used by the Titanic in 1912 to send some distress signals over 1,600 kilometers. So by modern legacy, while the Morse code was officially replaced for the maritime distress by the Global Maritime Distress and Safety Systems, or what we call the GMDSS, in 1999, it is still used today some of the amateur radio operators. So this time we should now understand the role of the IMO. So why is this IMO still part of the communication in the maritime industry? So as we all know, that the role of the IMO, so this sets the global standards by acting as a specialized union agency that facilitates the international cooperations between its 176 member states. So it sets global standards by acting as a specialized UN agency. So it creates the universal regulatory framework to ensure also the safe, secure, and efficient shipping on a clean oceans. So by this, the IMO, they establish the standards through some several key legal instruments. So we have here the conventions. So this is the major international treaties that establish for binding the rules for the member states once it is ratified. And then there's also some codes and some protocols. So the codes and protocols, There are the supplementary technical standards that often become a mandatory through the conventions. So it includes the ISPS codes for the security. And then next is what we call the tacit amendment procedures. So this one is the streamline, the process where the amendments automatically enter into the force unless it is a specific number of countries objects, allowing the IMO to quickly update technical standards for the new technology. We also have here what we call the institutional structure. So the standards are developed by the specialized committees and some subcommittees. So we have here what we call the Assembly and Council. So this is the governing and executive bodies that oversee the work of the program and the budget. And then next we have what we call the Maritime Safety and Committee. And then we also have what we call the Marine Environment Protection Committee. So this one is responsible for preventing and controlling the pollutions from ships, including the recent greenhouse gas reductions and strategies. And lastly, we have what we call the legal committee. So this one, it handles the legal matters such as the liability and compensation for the maritime damage. So this time we have the what we call the four pillars of the international shipping, because the IMO, it managed the three of the four pillar primary regulatory pillars of the global shipping. So first, we have here what we call the SOLAS, or the safety of life at the sea. So this one, it has the minimum safety standards for the ships, minimum safety standards for the ships, constructions, and some operations. We also have here what we call the MARPOL. So the MARPOL is the prevention of the pollution from the ships. So the rules is to minimize the operational and accidental operations. And then we next is we have the STCW, or what we call the standards of training, certification, and watch keeping. So this is the minimum qualification and training for the seafarers. And then lastly, the managed by ILO is what we call the MLC, or the Maritime Labor Convention. So this is the comprehensive rights and protections for the seafarers. So for implementation and enforcement, the IMO itself does not have enforcement powers. So the enforcement is decentralized through the flag state control. So first we have the flag state control. So the country where is the ship is registered must ensure that the vessel meets all the international standards. And then we have the port state control. So this is the countries have the rights to inspect the foreign ships in their ports and can detain them if they fail to meet the IMO standards. We also have here what we call the audit scheme. So the IMO member or the member state, they audit the scheme, assesses how effectively member governments they implemented and enforced the mandatory IMO instrument. So again, this one is all about the International Telecommunication Union, or what we call the ITU. So I have here some key aspects for the ITU's role. So first is the global radio regulations. So this is to maintain the RR or the radio regulations, an international treaty that binding on the member states. So that governs the use of the radio frequencies. And then next we have what we call the table of frequency allocations. So this one is to maintain this table which divides the spectrum from 3 hertz to 300 gigahertz. So this to a high into extremely high frequency bands into a various radio communication services such as the mobile, broadcasting, and then the satellites. And then we have next one is the World Radio Communication Conference. So this one it holds every 3 to 4 years. So this conference update the radio regulations and reflect the new technologies. And then we also have some satellite coordinations. So this one, it manage the notifications, coordinations, and registrations of the satellite frequency assignments to prevent the interference and manage the orbital slots. And then lastly is the harmonizations. So this one, it's enables the economies of scale for the equipment, ensuring that devices functions globally while minimizing the interference. So while the ITU allocates the frequency bands, the user is handled at the international level of the level by the member of the administrations. So we have now the two, what we call the bird's eye view, or the two main communication. So for this, so in the world of the connectivity, the data travels via two main or that often complementary paths. So we have what we call the terrestrial ground or the terrestrial, which is a ground based, and then the satellite, which is the space based. So first, the terrestrial communication. So this one, it relies on the infrastructure built on the Earth's surface. So it transmits the signals via cables, optical fibers, or radio waves through the antennas on the towers and buildings. So since this is a ground-based system, so for example of this is the 4G and 5G network that are primarily for the daily connectivity but are very limited for the geographical reach compared to the satellite networks. So we have here one of the components is the infrastructure. So it includes the cellular towers, fiber optic cables, terrestrial microwave links, the Wi-Fi networks, and some data processing centers. And then for functionality, it provides the high bandwidth or low latency and high capacity communication. So by this, it making them ideal for the some urban areas. And then, of course, it also have some limitations. So we have vulnerable to the nature disasters and the terrain obstacles. So the coverage is limited to the range of the ground infrastructure. So the terrestrial versus the non-terrestrial satellite. So what are the difference between these two? So the terrestrial network, so this one, it uses the ground transmitters. So for localized, high speed, and reliable, but geographical limited. And then the non-terrestrial. So the non-terrestrial, it uses the satellites that provide a broad global coverage and often used to extend or complement the terrestrial coverage in the remote areas. We also have here what we call the hybrid systems. So these are the modern networks that often integrate both terrestrial or both to provide comprehensive coverage and improve the reliability, especially during the disasters. So to make it short, the terrestrial networks are essential for the daily life that providing the fast and reliable connections through the extensive infrastructure on the ground. And then the next one, the second path or part of the main communication is what we call the satellite communication. So this one, the satellite communication, it acts as a space-based relay system. So it using the orbiting satellites to receive, amplify, and retransmit the radio signals between the widely separated Earth station or the other spacecraft. So as the key aspects of the satellite relays, first is what we have the components. So the system, it consists of the space segment, on the ground segment, and it transmitters, receives, and also the gateway. Next is the relay process. So this is the uplink that sends the signals from the Earth to the satellite. So then it will be retransmits them as a downlink to another location. And then next is the data relay satellite. So this one is specialized the system, such as the NASA. This one again is specialized the system such as the NASA's DBRSS act as intermediate nodes receiving data from the user's satellites and forwarding it to the ground station. And then we have here what we call the frequencies. So this communication uses the radio and microwave frequencies. So with the laser systems, it emerging for the higher data rates. And then we also have the key uses that includes the global telecommunications. So the mobile telephony and the data relay for space missions. And then it is also some importance of the standardizations. So why the interoperability between different nation ships is very important or very vital. So standardizations in the maritime industry is very critical for enhancing the safety, operational efficiency, and environmental sustainability. So, while enabling the digitalizations and global interoperability. So, it ensures the consistent, high quality operations that reduce the human error, streamline maintenance, and optimize the cost across the international borders. So I have here some key areas of importance. So first is the safety and risk management. So this is the standardized procedures that drastically reduce risk and accidents by ensuring that the crew are adequately trained and vessels meet recognized uniform safety standards. And then next is we have what we call the operational efficiency and cost reduction. So this one, it standardizes the practices, minimize the redundancies, optimize resources, and lower cost. So by this, it helping the industry stay competitive and efficient in the global market. And then we have here what we call the digitalizations and data exchange. So this is the industry that adopts the new technology. Standardizations is very important or very vital for the seamless exchange data. So it's making the digital systems interoperable and enabling for the instance, consistent, and reliable data ingestions. And then we also have here what we call the environmental sustainability. So this one, it's standards such as the ISO that assisting developing eco-friendly procedures, reducing the emissions and ensuring the compliance with the regulations like the IMO. And then lastly is the quality and reliability. So standardize the high quality manufacturing and maintenance. Guarantee the safety for the containerized and intermodal transmission, or I mean transport. And then I have here now some key. So here. So why is this? So why this uh, interoperability between different nations ship is very important. So this one, it's very vital for the ships because it enables the allied forces to act together uh, coherently, effectively, and efficiently to achieve the shared strategic, operational, and tactical goals. So, in an era of the complex geopolitical challenge and contested to the maritime environments, the capability of the transforms disparate navies into an unified force and enhancing the overall lethality and deterrence. So, okay. So that will be all for today as a part of our communication protocol. I'm going to discuss, or we will continue the discussions in our part two of our week 56. So for now, that will be all for today. So again, this is your instructor Elaine for your English Maritime course.